Our final presenter today is Breiffni Ó Domhnaill from TimeArc. Actually, it's not from TimeArc, it's from Propylon.
Yeah. Okay, hello everybody. My name is Breiffni Ó Domhnaill. So I'm working for Propylon on our new product, TimeArc. So historically, we provide solutions for state legislators. We also provide solutions for Big Four consultancy firms. And we're now adapting that technology for financial institutions. So as you are well aware, there is a growing volume of complex change in regulations. They're quite onerous and they're difficult to interpret. And banks are really struggling to keep up with this regulatory change. And if that's not bad enough, they have to deal with increased regulatory review from regulators and auditors and the board as well, because as the board become more personally liable, they have to monitor compliance more closely. So just before I go into the product, I'm going off topic here slightly, but it does have a purpose. It's probably the first time and the last time that a medieval scholar will feature in a FinTech presentation. So Luca Pacioli first established the principle of double entry in accounting. So since 1494, in accounting, for every transaction, there's a subsequent entry in the journal. So say, for example, in a bank payment, there is another entry into the expense account. So that provides the evidence on what that payment relates to. And then on top of that, there's a reference to an invoice. And that provides you a reference to the invoice that that payment relates to. And these systems have developed now so that accountants can view the balance sheet, view the audit trail, a complete audit trail over time. But if we look at compliance, the world is not as developed. So for example, if a regulator comes into a bank and says, demonstrate how you're compliant with a specific rule or regulation, compliance have to retrieve their policies at that date. They have to research the regulations on a separate platform at that date. And it's not easy to retrieve regulations for a historic point in time. Content providers are good at providing you with a view of the world as it is today. But if you need to determine what regulations were in place at a historic point in time, it consumes a lot of research. And then the third phase of that is you have to be able to demonstrate the relationships between your policies and your regulations to show that here are the policies that I implemented to comply with that rule. And on our initial project with this, that process took up 3 to 4 weeks. And with our TimeArc platform, we've reduced that process to a click of a button. So the TimeArc solution maintains complete timeline of regulatory content provided by leading content providers. And these are linked to your internal policies and procedures over time. So by selecting a date within the TimeArc system, you can instantly view the regulations that were in place at that date, and you can view the related policies that implement those rules. Again, then, when there's a regulatory change, it will list the policies and procedures that you need to review as a result of that regulatory change. So now a compliance officer doesn't need to spend as much time in determining what's the impact of the change. They can spend time on interpreting the new regulations and planning out the process. And this system, it maintains a complete audit trail of your responses to that regulatory change. So you can see the changes in your policies for the specific regulation. So now I'm going to provide you with some screenshots on the system. First of all, before I do that, I'll just give a few notes on the architecture. This is more for the technical guys in the room. We offer a hybrid solution or a complete cloud-based solution. So banks are very reluctant to put their internal material up on the cloud. And so we offer this hybrid cloud solution, but it operates as one platform. The end user, doesn't notice any difference in the platform. It operates as one system. So the regulatory content is stored on the cloud and provided by the leading content providers, and that's linked to your internal policies that are maintained within the firewall. The second feature of this is that we provide two options. You can take a feed from your existing policy and procedure systems, so you can continue to use them systems, because a lot of banks have invested heavily in this area, and they're not going to dramatically change the system. Or you can continue to use Word and Excel in a structured manner and to provide the reporting side of things. So this is my regulatory change dashboard. It's listing the policies that I need to review. So if we compare that to the process that's involved today, there's a lot of alerts being provided by the regulatory content providers. The compliance people monitor these alerts. Then they have to search their policies and procedures. What is the impact of these regulatory changes? And then they have to update their policies. And that can take a lot of time. And there's also the risk of a compliance professional missing a policy as a result of regulatory change. Because the policies are linked to the regulations, once a regulation is updated, it will tell you that you need to update these policies and procedures, reducing the risk that you miss a policy. We can navigate to the external regulations and view a complete history of this regulation and the changes over time. We can do a compare feature to provide a mocked-up version of the regulation. And also by selecting a date within the system, you can view the regulation, at that point in time. Now, if I was a salesperson, I'd be telling you that this is a time machine, but it has very strong audit trails, and it gives you an exact version of the world at that point in time. So, for example, General Counsel, they have, from one platform, a complete overview of the regulations and their policies at any point in time. And that reduces the costs involved in litigation, regulatory review. There's less dependency on external counsel, and there's less resources consumed. It's quite interesting, actually, that Stuart Gulliver, the CEO of HSBC, recently disclosed that 10% of their staff now work in compliance. So it's a big cost for these firms. FINRA, for example, the fines that they've issued for the first half of the year are 83% greater than the same period last year. So, first of all, you need a systematic approach to managing the regulatory change. But as a CCO put it to me recently, I can throw an army of people to manage this problem. But unless if I have the detailed audit trail there to demonstrate how I responded to that, it's no good. Because you could be 100% compliant, but unless you can prove it, you're going to be fined. And there's also some regulatory requirements, for example, the Volcker rule, trading in derivatives, whereby you need to be able to present your compliance program for the last 5 years or more, if requested by the regulator. And you need to be able to demonstrate compliance. So with this system, it dramatically reduced the costs, the reputational risk, and compliance risk. So within our internal firewall, we have a complete timeline of the changes in this policy. At any point in time, we can see the relationships with regulations and relationships with other elements of your internal compliance program. So for example, the Chief Compliance Officer will have complete overview of the response of the organization for changes in regulations. For example, we're provided with an alert here of a regulatory change, and a user updated this policy a month later for that regulatory change. When a regulator comes in, if they're investigating a specific area or a specific regulation, we can filter the policies and procedures so you can instantly present all the policies and all the procedures relating to that rule. So the benefits for a company, of course, there's reduced legal and compliance cost, there's reduced reputational risk, and reduce risk of fines and penalties. So for example, the client that we implemented the system, they've gained a significant return on investment. And there's also the regulatory requirements that you'll be able to present your compliance programs at any point in time. So we're currently working with partners in the industry. We work with regulatory content providers, the big four, and we are currently implementing this with financial institutions. It's a new project, but it's based on technology that has been used by state legislators and big four accountancy firms. So if you have any questions on the technology, please feel free to ask. This is where the fun starts.
Okay, thank you very much, Breiffni. Does anyone have a question for Breiffni?
Quick question, how old is the company?
Yes, so we've been established for 20 years, but we do not have the experience in the financial institution space. So we do work for 5 state legislators and European parliaments and big four consultancy firms, but this is a new market for us. It's a new market, but it has been somewhat validated. It has been validated by a big four consultancy firm.
Okay, and your target audience, because you mentioned before about Thomson Reuters, it sounds like it will be more big banks and hedge funds.
Yeah, so our target audience are the top 100 financial institutions who have the most regulatory burden across multiple jurisdictions. Our route to market on this is collaboration with existing GRC systems and content providers, and we're also in talks with banks at present.
Breiffni, thank you very much. Thank you. Very good. Thank you.